what's the right answer? Where does God want me to be? I get a little choked up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but my wife came upstairs and she said, "When did you find your cross?" And I'm like, "What are you?" I guess this was the farthest thing from. I'm like, what are you talking about?" And she's like, "Your little cross. I found it in the dryer. This is a brand new dryer. I wear this. I'm not a fancy clothes guy. I'm usually in the same clothes.
Thank you for joining me. How was that intro?
Man, I think you give me way too much credit, but Martin, I appreciate you inviting me in to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Let me feel famous for about 30 or 40 minutes, and I'm excited. I'm excited.
You are famous. I mean, you impacted me in 2014 when I might have been an E6, a tech sergeant back then, but here we are close, over 9 years later. Yeah.
It's amazing, and this plays into what I'll talk about later with the foundation.
Yeah.
But isn't it amazing how you plant a seed or something connects you to another individual, and a decade later you run into them and you pick it up right where you left off.
Well, yeah, I mean, like we're at a mutual friends party, and there's that stare of like, hey, I know this guy, right? And it's like the Spider-Man pointing at each other. But I want to ask you, please describe to me why life is great right now.
Oh my goodness, I am so blessed with so many different things. I did the almost 27 years, and
Yeah.
and then I rolled right into a contractor job for 5 years, and this opportunity came about with the Light Foundation, Matt Light. If you're a Patriots fan, then you know who he is. Left tackle for Tom Brady, 3 Super Bowl wins.
And he played at Purdue, and he blocked for Drew Brees.
He certainly did. So, I mean, talk about, a dream team, both in Purdue, blocking for Brees, and getting drafted and going to block for Brady, and the rest is, history. But, yeah, this opportunity presented itself, and we met through a mutual friend, Kurt King.
Okay.
A guy I went to high school with. He calls me up after I retired, and he says, "Hey, I work for a guy named Adam LaRoche. He used to be a professional baseball player."
Yeah. Did he play for the Reds and maybe the Braves?
He played for the Braves,
and the Orioles,
the Washington,
Yes.
and the White Sox.
and he played infield, right?
He was first baseman.
Yep,
Yeah. Hit like 260
Yeah.
home runs in his career. So he calls me up. He's like, "Hey, man, I know you like hunting and fishing, and I work for Adam LaRoche doing veteran hunts. We want to bring you out to Kansas." He's also part of this organization called Buck Commander.
Okay.
Luke Bryan, Willie from Duck Dynasty.
Wow.
So Jason Aldean. So it's a phenomenal organization. It's called the E3 Ranch.
Okay.
So he calls me and says, "Hey, remember when you took me trapping in the 7th grade?" And I'm like, "Man, I think so."
How old were you at this point?
I was, what's 7th grade? Like 12,
13.
13.
And then when you got this phone call, you were what? You look young, but
So I was 47.
so over 30
48.
years later.
Over 30 years
Yeah.
later. So he calls me. He's like, "I'm part of this. I want you to come out and do a hunt out here."
Yeah.
So I go out, meet Adam and the gang, who's a phenomenal human being. And from there on, Adam and Kurt asked me to come out and be a part of these veteran hunts to help them out, whether it's duck hunting or turkey hunting or deer hunting. And it's been a phenomenal 5 years. I go out there a couple times a year. Anyway, he introduces me to Matt Light and says, "Matt's in your backyard. You should get to know him. Volunteer up there." Started volunteering one camp. I was in camp for 3 days, and I told Matt, I said, "I can't tell you how I know, but I know God wants me to be
That's
at
awesome.
this place at this time." So, man, brother, life is great. I wake up, I'm excited to be a part of this foundation and helping kids. Couldn't ask for more.
What do you want people to know about the Light Foundation?
You hit it on the head, when you said we're trying to get kids out of their day-to-day routines, get them away from the cell phones, get them away from video games. We believe in this thing called attention, or what is it, nature deficit disorder.
Yeah.
And getting kids out and something magical happens when you get them away from all that crap of day-to-day life. And,
Yeah.
Um, and what I want you to know about that is we're a bunch of good people who are trying to instill these values of what we acronym as REAL: responsible, ethical, accountable leaders. And we're driving home those characteristics of, like in the military, integrity.
Yeah.
Integrity first, and the service and the excellence. It all comes together, and our audience is anywhere from first graders, where up in Dark County we have the Light Project, where we issue 72 science books to every first grade class in Dark County. We get them out to the trails, get them fishing, just looking at nature, enjoying being outside. And, from there we have, a whole slew of, we run 9,000 kids a year through
Wow.
Chenoweth Trails up there. And any nonprofit, especially like Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, high school, sports teams, if you're a nonprofit, you can use this 500-acre facility for free. And that's the way Matt is giving back to his hometown of Greenville. It's a way that he gives back to, trying to build good citizens. And in the end, that's what we're trying to do, is build good citizens.
That's awesome. Actually, I was reading this article last week, and it was based off my boss, Steve Watts, and he
I know Colonel Watts.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Shy guy, that one. No, but he was talking about we were talking about morning rituals and like different forms of meditation, and he discussed how when he first wakes up in the morning, the very first thing he does is stand outside barefoot, just to actually touch the physical grass and everything. And he was talking about, if you think about it, we really don't come into contact each day with man-made things. Everything we touch and we do is man-made. The cars that we're touching,
Absolutely.
So, and then a week later, I was on Instagram, and there was a whole scientific study that I sent it to him, but it talked about the importance of being at one, like, with the earth. And, and it made me think of the Light Foundation.
Absolutely.
And I think I saw it the day before we had that breakfast, maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I love that, because you're right. We're in a society now where people don't touch man-made things. Everything is. I mean, we only touch man-made things, right?
Yes.
So, sorry, I'm getting that backwards.
And real quick, you mentioned that breakfast that we had.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming out.
Our pleasure. Too
And,
easy.
Yeah, that made a difference in 13 young men's life.
Man, that was great. And it was an honor, and it was cool. Even trash talking the Army guy that was with you.
Absolutely. Sergeant Major Vince Brantley. Yes.
He's coming up in our house. He's going to get some trash talk. I want to switch gears. I had to write this down because we have mutual friends, one of whom I work with and see on a regular basis, and you know who I'm talking about. I told that individual that I would soon be recording a podcast with you.
Oh, boy.
And I asked this, actually, I'm just going to say his name, Chris Martin, right? So I asked Chris Martin, I said, hey, I'm going to do this podcast with Troy. What's a question I can ask him that I can't find on the internet? And I did research you.
Okay.
So with that, please tell me about the cross. The cross.
What cross?
He said that.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. I was like,
I have it in my pocket right now. This is, a lot of people won't believe this story, and I'm okay with that. But when I joined the Air Force, I had a really strong Christian lady, neighbor lady. She gave me a cross, and I took it with me every assignment. I carried it daily, every deployment, all around the world, 65 different countries.
Wow.
It's unreal, but that in the end, that's the truth. So I lost this cross. I was at DIA. I was the command chief at DIA. And I was up in my office, and I for whatever reason, I put my hand in my pocket. The cross is not there. And I'm like, oh, no. I had to be in the metal detector. When you walk through, you dump all your stuff in the little bowl.
And you had this cross for how long at that point?
I had it since 1991, and it was 2014-ish,
Okay.
so 23 years.
Yeah.
So I went immediately down to the security checkpoint, and I was like, hey, did anybody turn in this little cross? And, no, they never, I never saw that cross again until last August.
So hold that thought for a second.
Yes, sir.
In that moment when you didn't find it, when you lost it, and then you went down to Lost and Found, they didn't have it? What were you feeling in that moment? Because you had this for 23 years.
Absolutely. And it was like, I maybe mourning is too strong of a word, but I mean, it was just kind of like dread. Like this cross had been everywhere
Yeah.
with me. And it meant, and it's not like a lucky charm or anything. It's just a reminder, of my faith and, just the things that are important to me
Right.
in my life. And yeah, so dread, I'm like, this is unbelievable. Where could it be?
Yeah.
Never saw that cross again. 8 years later, I know this sounds strange. I'm praying. So I'm working for the defense contractor and I'm toying with this idea with the Light Foundation and I'm praying about, what's the right answer? Where does God want me to be? I get a little choked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but my wife came upstairs and she said, "When did you find your cross?" And I'm like, "What do you?" Like this was the farthest thing from. I'm like, What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Your little cross. I found it in the dryer. This is a brand new dryer. I wear this. I'm not a fancy clothes guy. I'm usually in the same clothes week in and week out. How this cross ended up in the dryer, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And when I tell that story, I know people are like, "Oh, well, maybe you washed something that you wore 8 years ago,
Yeah.
and it just popped out." If I did, I certainly don't remember that,
Yeah.
and my wife doesn't either. It's just how did this happen? But it was for me, it was another sign that what, I needed to follow my heart, go work with these kids, and try to make a difference in their life. But
So what year was this?
so this was last year in
to
August of 22.
So you had lost it for 8 years.
8 years. I
Yeah.
never saw that cross again. And like I said, this is the cross.
Yeah.
And yeah. So 32 years now I've had this cross.
Do you mind if I look at it?
Oh, please.
Yeah.
It's just a simple little aluminum cross. But the lady that gave it to me, it meant something to her, and it certainly has meant something for me. And I can't explain it, Martin. I really can't. But all I can tell you is that's the truth.
You feel like that was some divine intervention, and you kind of alluded to it to maybe
I do.
as a sign
I
to
do.
take that position.
And I'm as I'm getting older, maybe that's it. I've always been a believer.
Yeah.
But I would say God wasn't first in my life. Honestly, the Air Force became my God. That I was all in on the Air Force and whatever it took to, meet
Yeah.
the demands there. But as I'm getting older, I pray a lot more, meditate a lot more.
Yeah.
Certainly about the meaning of life and what's important. And I do think it was a sign.
Now, how were you able to translate like what you do or what you did in the military? You did a lot of different jobs, and even as you had some of these reflections, we talk about reflecting and looking back. But how were you able to translate, what you reflect on and what you did in the military into your current role with the Light Foundation, and then just mentoring young people?
It is, and I think, at any age, mentoring is basically the same.
Yeah.
So I take the Air Force core values very seriously, and I try to instill them in the kids. But talking with, getting to know what motivates these, the young men and women that come through these programs. I mean, sitting with them and talking without distractions.
Yeah.
That's we used to call it management by walking around.
Yeah.
Right? You
Yeah.
got to know your people.
Yeah.
You got to know what motivates them and what they're dealing with in their life and what situation they come from. All it's as simple as that. And certainly after almost 27 years in the military, all the leadership courses that you go through, and I was very blessed. I was able to wear chief for almost 10 years.
Jeez.
And I did 3 different command chief tours, and the chief of the Chiefs group. But those, like, when I look back, you get further away from actually having really getting to know the people, and you rely on a lot of secondhand information from different levels of the command.
Yeah.
But man, that squadron soup job, when I look back, that was one of the greatest jobs I ever had. See the immediate impact of decisions that you make, and
Yeah.
and nothing like being as close as you can get to the folks who are actually getting the mission done.
I love being in the squadron. It was
Absolutely.
yeah, it's
Cherish those days, and I'll tell you.
and I'm past them like now, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, and it's funny. Like we get to wear, Chief,
Yeah.
get to wear the uniform for just such a brief period of time, and when you look back, you look at like some of the things maybe I should have paused a little bit and just appreciated where I stood, in whatever organization or where I was at in my career. I was always I always felt like I was running out of time. Like,
Yeah.
Like I got to hurry up and get this done. And so I pushed through a lot of things when I wish I would have just said, hey, you know what? This is pretty cool right now. Just enjoy it for a minute.
And I that's something I've learned and had to in the hard way, but I'm glad I realized it. It was just take time to just relish and embrace the moments, right?
Absolutely.
Or the moment.
Absolutely.
Because time is fleeting. I mean, I'm at 21 years.
In the blink of an eye.
I've been blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And it's weird for me that people. So next Friday, I'm going to Colorado and I'm emceeing a retirement ceremony for dear friends, people I've known since training. They came in the military after me, so it's weird to be at a state now in my career where people who joined after me, are retiring.
Yeah. And I remember, kind of meeting the folks that after I went over like 18, 19, 20 years,
Yeah.
and they hadn't been born yet. And, you're like, what in the world? What is going on?
No, I'm 41. I'm still a young man, but I met someone
Absolutely.
recently, and someone that's in, and you're like, oh, you're the same age. You're older than my mom and dad. Now, granted, their parents had them obviously super young, but
Yeah.
still the fact that I'm like, excuse me, how dare you know?
Yes. And as you get older, you have more and more of those moments for sure.
No. I want to just stay on the subject of, because I love just what you're doing, in Matt White with the Light Foundation, just the mentorship, and it's just simple things, right?
It is.
But I want to kind of, if you were given control of the American education system, what would you add to the curriculum of high school students and why?
Wow, can I start with elementary school kids?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But it plays out, in my mind, all through education and life. But, ethics, I don't think, until you get to high school, do you really dive into, probably an optional class to take ethics.
Yeah.
But, character matters, and it matters more and more in today's age where everything is digital, everything is done, really without feeling. You're on your Facebook or Instagram, whatever it is, and you instantly reply.
Yeah.
And there's really no thought put into it. And I think, the developing of character, especially through elementary school, middle school, and high school, is critical. And I think, in today's society, with soaring crime rates, with a lack of respect for, your neighbor, I think we have drifted away from our soul, from our character.
Yeah, and it's tough because I see people that they don't know how to, not that anyone really writes checks anymore, but people that don't know how to write a check.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or even some basic like car maintenance stuff like in adulthood.
And I do think you hit on the check, but financial education, it was non-existent when I went through high school, and way back, I graduated in '88, and it was non-existent. And I just talked to one of the doctors in the Dayton school system.
Yeah.
And he said, oh no, we don't teach any financial education, and we're doing away with physical fitness, PE class. And you're like, this can't be good. It can't be good.
I do want to kind of go down a different path now. You've led and worked at so many different levels, and regardless if someone is military or not, I think there's a lot of lessons learned to be passed on from you, and you're certainly someone that I respect. I know many people respect, revere, and admire. So in my podcast, it focuses on the positive subjects of leadership, mentorship, inspiration, and resilience. But there's a lot of people they're struggling on, like, they want to do the right thing, and it's easy to, like, especially in the military, like if you're a certain rank or position, like you can influence at that, at that rank and below. But what's your advice to people who are struggling on how to lead and influence up the chain?
Honesty. Um, I throughout my career, you see it at all levels
Yeah.
where they only want to say good news, right? That middle, if you're a middle leader, you're only piping up good news to the, and I've had fantastic bosses. I mean, from the current, actually, I mean, from lieutenant through 3-star general, that were my direct bosses, and
Give someone a positive shout out. Like, let's talk.
oh man, I can throw out some names.
Throw them out.
Let's talk about Lieutenant Hawk, who just picked up his 4th star and is going to be NSA. His first day, the NSA director, his first day on flight in the Air Force was with me over in Misawa Air Base, Japan, 1992, 93. He came in as a flight commander. Obviously there was a captain there that he was learning from, but yeah, he came in as a flight commander. Phenomenal human being then, and phenomenal human being now. He's never changed his core principles.
I love that. I want to interject right there, and I
Please.
love that because I don't know him personally, obviously, right? But I've been under his command, and someone that I respect and admire knows him really well and worked extremely close with General Hawk. And he told me the best advice that he ever received was, as a leader, be consistent. Because a lot of times there's people, like, they're too up and down with their emotions and their attitudes and everything, and that really stuck with me, and that's something I've applied over the past 4 years, and it's based on through someone that General Hawk had passed on. But be consistent.
General Hawk is a phenomenal one. Paul Nelson, he was the commander of the 480th ISR wing. He hired me in my first command chief job, and he's let me just rattle General Michael Flynn.
Wow.
He was, there's been a lot of bad publicity, surrounding him. And I'll tell you, it's a funny story. When I was leaving DIA, he's like, Troy, what are you gonna do? And I said, well, I still want to serve a couple of years. He goes, no, I'm not talking about that. When you retire, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't know, maybe go into politics, maybe do a school. And it's funny. He's like, hey, Troy, I'm telling you, stay out of politics. So I was like, all right, General. And then to see, what happened when he became Trump's national security advisor, and the politicization of that whole situation, but he was a phenomenal leader. He would walk down the halls of DIA, any of the janitorial staff, the cooks, the people cleaning the tables in the cafeteria. He knew their name and he knew their story. A lot of them were immigrants. He knew where they came from. He knew their background. I mean, man, you talk about servant-based leadership.
Yeah.
He wasn't just the commander for the intel folks or some of the ops folks. He was the commander for every person in that building. And, I mean, like I said, servant-based leadership, he's a phenomenal example.
Oh, that's great.
One more?
Yeah.
General Lee Lauterbach.
I was gonna. Hopefully, you mentioned that. So,
Yes,
please go ahead.
Yeah, no, another, great human being and great leader. And you mentioned it earlier, like consistent.
Yeah.
When I was at the Chiefs group, we had this saying about being firm, fair, and consistent, right? That's how that's good leadership.
Yeah.
She was as consistent as you can get. And, I learned, through her, a lot of taking the emotion out of the situation, and just looking at the facts. Let's look at the facts, because a lot of things hit you personally.
Yeah.
And actually, it's a book I'm reading now on how not to take things personal.
What book?
It's called The Four Agreements.
Okay.
It's by Don Ruiz, and it's a fantastic book. And basically it's saying that you're kind of hardwired from birth, or the influence you get early on sets these agreements in your mind. Like the first agreement, be impeccable with your word. Right, so that's not just saying, "Oh, I'll be there at this time" and showing up. It's more than that. It's impeccable. Actually means without sin. The Latin is impectus, or pectus is sin, and then the M is without.
Oh.
And so without sin, meaning how you talk about people, how you talk to people, and staying above kind of the emotional outbursts we all go through.
Yeah.
Um, so the four agreements are: be impeccable with your word. Um, it's funny,
Use your
when you're
notes,
put
man.
on the
Yeah.
spot.
No.
Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and don't or do your best always. And it's interesting how he dives into, like, I'll just say the don't make assumptions. How many disagreements have you had with your wife? Only you're assuming, oh yeah, she's going to take care of that, and
Right.
without. So don't make assumptions. Just ask questions, and be open to that. But I would highly recommend that the Four Agreements. It's just it's a good thought provoking book.
No, that's great. And thanks for sharing, giving the people the positive shout out. And I try to do that as best possible in every episode because, we're all impacted by somebody.
Absolutely, and so I know I mentioned a lot of officers. There's chiefs that I grew up with. Buddy Hutchinson. I don't know if you remember him. Phenomenal chief. Jack Johnson, another just unbelievable leader with character.
Now, with General Nelson, that when he was a group commander, he was Colonel Nelson
Yes.
in Massawa, and
Yes.
and I used to have to brief him every week. But he coined me. I'll never forget. I had a great rapport with him, and I know he went on to do big things. But
He did.
Small world.
It is, and we still talk to this day. We still text. We're talking about fishing and hunting now, but
Please tell him I said hello and that
I-
I speak highly of him, and I still have his
certainly
coin, from 20 years ago.
I will let him know. And but I think you started this off with how do you pass information up the chain of command? So he was one of those guys that said, Troy, I don't need you to agree with me. Right? I need a devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I need to hear the ugly stuff. And that's the story of my career. All those leaders, they wanted to hear that. And I think, it says a lot about you as a leader. If you don't want to hear the negative stuff, then you're not really, doing your job. But he didn't, they didn't need somebody in that same room agreeing with everything they said.
Yeah.
They needed to hear a different perspective.
No, that's
And that's the same with no matter if you're a staff sergeant up through chief. You gotta give the leaders a perspective and the truth.
yeah, and that's something I've had to learn. Let's say maybe over the past 8 years or so is leading and influencing up, and I've had people ask me that in various. I had a boss ask me that in a feedback session. And I was like, man, that's pretty good, right? Like, and even if we're good at it, like you got to constantly
Absolutely.
stay sharp on it. I know we're kind of jumping around, but there's just a lot of different things I want to talk to you about. But what do you want people to know about the Light Foundation?
And I tell you, so let me briefly explain the Light Foundation.
Go for it.
So in 2001, Matt and Susie Light, and Susie is just as important as Matt in this, but they formed this Light Foundation, and it, with the goal of getting kids into nature. We have a 500-acre facility. We have 2 yurts that sleep 24 individuals at a time. There's a pavilion. There's a 100-seat amphitheater. There's a pond for fishing and swimming, and there's a bunch of leadership opportunities, different games and obstacles.
Yeah.
On that, there's 10 miles of trails out there, and they have built that from literally scratch. It was farmland and woodland before they purchased it and started this journey of the Light Foundation. But I mentioned earlier, 9,000 kids come through that facility a year. It's a tremendous impact. Can I tell you a little bit about this camp that you got to be a part of?
Go for it. Absolutely.
So this is an amazing. It's called Camp Bohoicus. That's a Northern Cheyenne word for light.
Okay.
And it's kind of where this the foundation's name stemmed from. But Camp Bohoicus takes 4 kids a year, so it's like a high school. So picture it. So at the most we'll have 16 kids in a camp every year. But these 8th graders that are going into their freshman year, they go through an interview process. They sign a contract. and we're working with the school districts. We're working with superintendents. I met with Mayor Mims, or I think it's Mayor Mims of Dayton, to get this net last class from Dayton. But they signed a 4-year agreement stating that, hey, I'm going to maintain at least a C grade, C average. I'm going to do community service. I'm going to be a leader, where I stand.
Yeah.
And we have this, what you got to experience where we have 4 Native Americans from the Passamaquoddy Reservation in Maine. We have 4 kids from Brockton, just outside of Boston. We've got 4 Greenville kids who just graduated this. I'm sorry, 3 Greenville kids that just graduated this year, and we brought in 3 Dayton kids.
Okay.
They're the incoming freshman class, and man, you bring those different cultures, different personalities. You talk about diversity of thought and diversity in general, and man, that it's just phenomenal to see these kids come together, and we put them through the ringers. Last year, it's an 8-day camp, and we are busy from 6:30 in the morning when we get up and do PT.
Yeah.
To we do a fireside chat at 9:00 at night for about an hour where it gets real. It gets a lot of tears, a lot of emotions, and then they're in bed and we're back at it. So last year, near the last day of camp, we had taught them some shelter building, fire making, boiling water. So at 8:00 at night, after we went all day, we said, hey, go get your paintball clothes on. We're going for a hike. And we did an overnight hike and hit 13 different obstacles. These kids were phenomenal. Wow. We used land nav. We did all the, and there's some really incredible exercises, that they went through. One, we're at 1:30 in the morning and we're going through, following our path, and we come up on 65 cinder blocks that's on a pallet.
Okay.
And we're in the middle of the woods, middle of nowhere. And the challenge was find another pallet within 100 yards, transfer these blocks to that pallet. So, what they did was they found it, and they transferred these blocks about 100 yards, 65 of them, 130. If you would have thought about it, it didn't say you couldn't move that pallet, put it next to the pallet with the blocks, and just transfer the blocks like that. So a lot of exercises, like that, thinking through. But, some of them still talking. They're like, you know what? Hey, I had a bad day today, but I wasn't moving cinder blocks at 1:30 in the morning. It's a pretty cool thing.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and those the senior class was from Southeast DC. They are all in school. One of them's going to a small school in Pennsylvania college. He's a quarterback out there. We got a guy going to Wisconsin.
Wow.
And these are going to be the leaders, in the future. They are absolutely going to be leaders wherever they are.
Man, that's so amazing. Man, Troy, I'm so proud of you for doing this. And it's inspiration.
No,
I love that. Man, that's so great. It's speechless.
I say that, I am so blessed. That I just want to say it like that. Like, I am blessed, and here's another story my wife could verify. But I used to joke, I'd say, wow, if he hit the lottery,
yeah,
I want to start a camp for underprivileged kids or underserved kids, and teach them hunting, fishing, trapping, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
I hit the lottery. This is my lottery, and I feel like I still get to serve, and that's a good feeling.
No, it's great, and I know I know the money that you walked away from, or I can guess and stuff. So it
was pretty good money.
No, yeah, but it's so admirable, and it's inspiring. 2 last questions I want to ask
Please.
you. So, actually, I want a couple more. I'm going to have some fun with you.
Yeah,
but there's one we're going to close out with that I save, and it ties into everything you just talked
He's
about.
going to make me cry.
No, I don't think so. But it's okay if you do. You wouldn't be the first. I cried during episodes too. When you think of a movie image that depicts leadership, who or what comes to mind?
I got another story if you don't mind.
Go for it. This is great.
So, Braveheart.
Okay.
Braveheart comes to mind. William Wallace.
Yeah.
And, Matt obviously has a lot of connections, Matt and Susie. We had a gentleman come in from Scotland this last camp, last week, billionaire, came in like a legit billionaire, owns half of Scotland, comes in to spend 2.5 days in our camp because Matt was over there in Scotland telling him about what we do out here, and he's like, I got to see it. So he comes and spends 2.5 days with us. And you know, he's given us the William Wallace speech with his Scottish accent. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. But, man, you look at William Wallace as being an authentic leader and leading from the front. And, you know, he's willing to take the arrows right along with his, you know, comrades. And, like, that's, to me, like, if you're in the trenches, then you're doing something right. And people are going to follow. You know, they see authenticity. You know, people naturally, you know, they have a BS detector.
Yeah.
They can tell when you're being fake, and they can tell when you're authentic. And I think he pops to my mind immediately. But this gentleman, I mean, to spend that much time with these kids,
Yeah.
out of purity, like, I want to see what you're doing, and I might replicate this in Scotland.
That's incredible.
It's
like
unbelievable.
It's just the fact that he followed up, right? Like he had this conversation,
Absolutely.
you know, overseas, right? Or,
Yes.
you know, and then, you know, not just I'm gonna come check it out, and just you know, and especially with his financial status, he could very easily come up with some like, hey, I got this going on,
Absolutely.
you know. But 2.5, and even for him to be there and be present for 2.5 days, not just a 30-minute
Yes.
drop in, right? Which is great too. People, if that's all the time they have, you know,
Yeah.
but 2.5 days, that's
And I got to be honest, he's the one that recommended the 4 agreements to me.
okay.
So actually, he recommended it to everybody, and I immediately bought it. I'm like, I want to know how this guy thinks, and he's like, this is how I think. And you know, not only did he come out and meet, but he gave us, you know, his email address for these kids
Wow.
to fire away questions at him. It's just, you know, unbelievable. And we're already talking about doing a joint American Scottish camp. So it's just it's crazy how things are lining up.
That's so great, man. That's okay. So we're gonna take it a step further since you brought up the movie Braveheart,
right.
and we talked about movie images. When the movie is inevitably made about your life, who's gonna play you, and then who's gonna play Matt White?
Oh wow. Well, obviously, I mean, I'm better looking and
You are.
physically stronger. Wow. I guess, you know, probably Danny DeVito, if people remember him.
Stop. Stop.
You know, who I'd want to play. Actually, my son Joey Eden is in
Okay.
The Diplomat, the series, Netflix series.
Oh, no kidding.
He's in that. He's separating from the Marine Corps in about a week. And
That's right. I forgot that your son was in the Marines.
Yeah,
You mentioned this to me before, but
yeah, he's a Marine
yeah.
and done 8 years, and he's separating, like I said, in a week to pursue his acting. He's already shot season 2 of the Diplomat.
Oh, that's so great.
And I would want him to play me. And I think for Matt, I mean, you need somebody.
I have some recommendations. Anybody
Bradley
can play.
Cooper.
Yeah, I was gonna say Ryan Gosling, but then
Right. Oh,
you know, but
he's
Ryan
gonna,
Gosling's not built like a left tackle.
He's going to beat me if I say Ryan Gosling.
Man, you know what? You know, in Hollywood these days, like you know, it's all about the performance, right? So I'm just gonna say The Rock. The Rock, like
You know what? Yes, let's stick with that. Let's go with The Rock. I
Yeah.
think that.
or Chris Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth's another one. Wow.
You know, just you know, when I look at Matt, I think of like, man, that guy is that The Rock, or is that, you know, when I see Matt White, he's a hybrid of Chris Hemsworth and Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
And I mean, you know, I mean, you're looking at a guy 6'4", still, you know, put together.
Yeah.
You know, 300 plus pounds. He'll probably beat me for that, but his heart is bigger than his physical size. I mean, you know, you got to meet him, you got to talk to him a little bit, and if you can't see that guy's a real guy and practices what he preaches and wants to provide these opportunities for underserved communities, man, it can't get more plain than meeting and talking with that guy.
Well, the fact they started he and Susie Light started this foundation in 2001. Here we are, 22 years later.
Yes.
Post, you know, did he get drafted in 2000?
Yes.
Right. So like, I mean, he was on his rookie contract.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Nothing's guaranteed. I mean,
Nothing. Yeah. Nothing. NFL money wasn't then what it is now.
No.
And
certainly
then
not.
for him to be doing this post, playing career is remarkable.
And this is the guy too who he's never bought a new car.
Yeah.
He's never flown first class on that he would pay for. Corporations have flown him out certainly, but
Yeah.
he's just not that guy.
And I love that even like a lot of people stopped doing things during COVID where it just found it, and just, man, here we are in 2023 and it's still going
Absolutely.
strong.
Absolutely.
I have two last questions if you have time.
Yes, sir.
All right. If you could put a billboard anywhere and write anything on it, where would you place a billboard and what would your message say? And it would have your picture on it.
Oh,
But it's going to have there's a photo I found of you from Hawaii when you were right. I mean, you were chiefing back then too, right? But you were tan, so it's a very flattering.
okay. All right. Maybe
photo.
a few pounds less. And
You look great now as well, but definitely more tan back in sunny Hawaii. So we'll use that picture.
All right.
But,
Okay.
Anyway, where would the billboard be, and what message would you want for everyone to see and read?
That's it. So let's put the billboard in Times Square.
Okay.
And God changed my life. That faith is powerful.
Yeah.
And in the military, wearing the uniform, you didn't do a lot of preaching, right? You didn't want to alienate,
Yeah. Exactly.
And now that I'm not in uniform, and really recognize how much God has been along, the path with me. I mean, yeah, God changed my life, and that's what I'd want. Maybe God changed my life, and He can change yours too.
Man, do you want that to be the name? Man, I need you to come up with a name for the episode. That's
Okay, all right.
man, that's pretty good. Lastly, what are your ask or request for people listening to this episode?
My hearing's getting a little bad. Could you say that again?
Yeah, what are your ask or request for people listening to this episode?
Asks or requests. What I would ask is, obviously, being in the military, you're in a violent business.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you're going to take life and destroy things. We all know that. But there's time to be kind, as you go along. Not to the enemy, I'm
Yeah.
certainly, but I think everybody gets in so much of a rush. Small things. There's another book, The Butterfly Effect. I don't know if you've read that one, by Andy Andrews, and The Traveler's Gift by Andy Andrews. Both talk about how you change the course of somebody's life. It could be by actions, or it could be just by a simple phrase, or some words that you say, but you have an impact on somebody's life, whether it's going to be positive or negative. It's really up to you, how that's determined. But I think taking time to really get to know the people that surround you.
Yeah.
That especially if you're in a leadership position, the people that you have charge over, you owe them the time to get to know them. So I think, being kind, taking time to get to know people, I would also ask people to pause, wherever they're at in their career, wherever they're at in life. Life comes at us pretty fast, and it can get ugly, and you get caught up in the day-to-day, and I certainly have. But pause and count your blessings. I think those are a couple of things that I would ask people, if they hear this podcast, to really focus on.
No, that's great. I want to end on that note. That's beautiful. Troy, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
It's certainly my honor, man. Thank you, Martin.
I want to show you because I wrote down, this is my magic book. Well, I'm a big writer. This is what I shared that day at the breakfast, right?
Yes.
So this is my personal, I write down like